Hey, good morning, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. Again, it's Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025 at 6:00 in the morning. We have just gone through our security briefing, and I would entertain a motion to come out of executive session.
So make a motion.
Oh, a second.
Second.
Representative White. Second. Representative Bosch. There, discussion. Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So we're out of executive session. There's no, there's nothing for us to discuss on the security briefing. So now we will have Legislative Counsel Rick Sagal walk us through H34, which is the Workforce Leadership in Vermont bill. This is your first
Oh, go ahead one real
walk
quick.
through this year of a legislation you're contemplating. Rick, good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Rick Sagal, Office of Legislative Counsel. And Andy Grace, I asked you, Zoom invite. Could you, thank you. I want to be able to share my screen here. How is everybody?
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
How you doing?
I barely, the walk from 2 Aiken took, it was almost froze to death out there.
I don't doubt it.
Is my hands were. Okay, so Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I think I might give some background as to H34, how we got here, since we have some new committee members, if you don't mind. I'm going to share my web browser for a moment. Okay. So we're here on H34, but before we get to H34, I do want to go over what this committee and the assembly did last session. So on the screen, I have.
Maybe even before that,
Mhm.
Rick, I'll take us back even prior to that.
Sure.
So this actually all started in 2020. It was through a conference, the Committee of Conference between the House and the Senate, our counterparts, Senate Economic Development, the House Commerce. It was brought up by the Senate that we should actually have, there should be a person that is dedicated to workforce development that sits under the governor and answers directly to the governor. And at the time, when we were having these discussions in conference committee, we also had some discussions with the administration as well. Kendall Smith was our liaison, and we worked with her, and we came up with a proposition to have a study committee. And in that study committee, we asked to look at the State Workforce Development Board, continue those discussions on whether or not we should have that executive director. And at the same time, we hired a consultant to come in. And so we went through that whole process of hiring a consultant, finding one, hiring one. We went through and had, you know, how many meetings with the consultant. They gave us a lot of good recommendations. We talked about changing the amount of people that sit on the State Workforce Development Board, which at the time was 63. We also talked about this new executive director, what they should be charged with. And in those conversations, we also understood that at the time, right now, the champion of workforce development was the Commissioner of Department of Labor. And so, and during those discussions, we also understood that we're really looking at WIOA, but WIOA is the Workforce Innovation Opportunities Act, the federal program that that is run through the Department of Labor. That they didn't encompass everything that was going on in the state for workforce development. So in our discussions with this task force, we decided that we really needed someone in that position that could work with the Department of Labor and work with the commissioner, but also on the outside, inventorying all of the other organizations that are out there that contribute to workforce development and try to convene, perhaps regionally convene and statewide convene all of these partners together at certain times of the year to have the best outcomes possible for our workforce and to make sure that we're not duplicating services. I think there could be a lot of dollars out there that are being spent on duplication that could otherwise be spent in other areas within the workforce. And so last year, in talking with our counterparts again in Senate Economic Development, we decided that we needed to reconstitute the task force one more time. And so we did that. And this is the result of all of this, the discussions that we had over the summer and fall of now, how do we go forward with a new executive director? What are their responsibilities? But also, how do we hire this person? What are the attributes that the governor should think about when he is hiring the person as the new executive director of workforce strategy and development? And we also took a look at the recommendation on the size of the State Workforce Development Board. And we decided that the State Workforce Development Board was going to cease. And this was in legislation last year, and that it will be reconstituted from 63 members to 27 members. And that's a federally minimum amount of members you can have. So that was done. And now in this legislation, we've worked to identify the duties of the commissioner of the Department of Labor. We're also identifying the duties of the new executive director. And so you're going to see a lot of new language, and you're going to see a lot of stricken language as well. So Rick will walk us through all of that. And Rick, you can fill in where I tried to do just a high level of what the SOCWED did and where we're at now.
A very, very good summary, very more detailed than I had, because again, I started last year. So my knowledge of this area begins and ends in 2024, last session. But last year when I was here, this committee and the Assembly passed H707 Act 146, which you see on the screen. And I just want to highlight a couple of things of why, this will kind of show why we're here on H34, just to kind of give you an exact reason why. So in Act 146, the Assembly created this new Office of Workforce Strategy and Development, which, as the chair described, the reasons for that and how we got to that decision. When the Assembly did that, we realized that there would be some, not consequences, but some collateral damage done to other statutes, where previously the Commissioner of Labor had the authority over some of this workforce development and training. So in this bill, go down to the page where we reconstituted SOCWED. In section 4, in Act 146, the Special Oversight Committee, SOCWED, I'm sure you've heard that word a couple times. That's what it stands for. The Special Oversight Committee on Workforce Expansion and Development, that was initially created in 2022, was reauthorized to address two things. One, the leadership and duties set forth in this statute, which this H34, that's what is edited, and H34 is 10 VSA 540. And also the recommended qualifications for the governor to consider for this new position. So those two things is what the SOCWIC committee considered over the summer and fall. They met, I think, 7 times to discuss these two things. So as a result of the SOCWIC's work, H34 was introduced, which again is editing or amending 10 VSA 540. And I'll just go ahead and start walking through this unless anybody needs any more background information about how we got here.
I just people that were on the task force, I was on it. Senator Clarkson was on it. Commissioner Harrington and Kendall Smith, who is now Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Labor, and Adam Grenold started on the task force. He was the chair of the State Workforce Development Board. However, when July 1st came about, the State Workforce Development Board ceased to exist until it was reconstituted by the governor. So he didn't have a position on the task force, but he did he did supply and continue to work with us, helping to develop this language, as did Jay Ramsey from the Department of Labor. Ellen Kaler also helped. Representative Branning was also sitting in and listening and providing comment and assistance as well. So I just want to thank all of everyone that was on the task force that helped get us to this point.
Okay. And like the chair said, a lot of this language is grammatical because previously there was one leader, the Commissioner of Labor, Workforce Education and Training. And now we added a second person to be a co-leader. And also, I'm not sure if this is the committee's first walkthrough of a bill, but it is. Okay. So if there's any questions about, it gets kind of messy sometimes. So if you need clarification as to what underline means, or why is this word crossed out when, for example, leader and leaders, why didn't I just add an S? Well, because the editing style is you delete the whole word, even if it's just adding a letter to the word. So things like that, just I'd be glad to clarify for you all. Okay, so in 540, we are making changes to ensure that this new position, this executive director of the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development, is now considered to be a co-leader along with the Commissioner of Labor of Workforce Education. And we added the word or the phrase "and employment" to ensure that this new co-leadership group is assigned to the right type of workforce development. So you'll see this a lot. You'll see workforce education and employment and training throughout the statute. And I can read it word for word, or I can kind of summarize the big points here. But so far in subsection A, we are just adding the second leader and clarifying that last sentence there as provided in this section. Subsection B, the powers and duties provided in this section shall not limit, restrict, or suspend any similar powers the Commissioner of Labor or the Executive Director may have under other provisions. We just wanted that to clarify. We're not superseding anything. We're not overriding anything that is elsewhere in the Vermont Code Book. Subsection C, for purposes of the Federal Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, you'll probably hear that on and off. The Department of Labor shall be designated as the state workforce agency, and the Commissioner of Labor shall serve as the state workforce administrator. That's required by federal law, so we included that language there. Subsection D, as co-leader of workforce education and employment and training in the state, the Commissioner of Labor, in consultation with the Executive Director of the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development, where appropriate, shall. So we wanted to make sure that these people actually work together, that there's going to be times in this list I'm about to go through that the Commissioner of Labor should consult with the Executive Director. That person doesn't have to, but here the language is saying we're suggesting that you two collaborate on certain things. One, ensure the coordination and administration of workforce education and employment and training programs operated by the Department of Labor. And there's a lot of language that's been struck here. Some of this language reappears. But again, because we have this new position, we have to kind of reconfigure some of these powers. Enter into agreements to the extent necessary with other state agencies and departments for services to improve the employment and economic outcomes for individuals receiving public assistance, including agreements to provide customized or specialized services that are beyond the basic services required by federal law. 3, develop strategies and provide support to entities responsible for federal investments in the state's workforce system. 4A, develop strategies designed to reduce employee layoffs and business closures. And B, provide reemployment services to employees affected by layoffs and closures. 5, administer a system where employment and training resources are provided to individuals and businesses through both physical and virtual service delivery methods. 6, establish job centers in such parts of the state as the commissioner deems necessary and evaluate such centers on an as-needed basis. 7, maintain a free and secure electronic job board that, to the extent practicable, compiles all available job, registered apprenticeship, education and training, and credentialing opportunities that support job seekers and career advancers. 8, use data to ensure that state workforce education and employment and training activities are aligned with the needs of the available workforce, employers to fill their current and future job openings, and specific credentials required by employers. 9, require that each business, training provider, or other entity receiving state funding to conduct workforce training submit a report that evaluates the results of the training. And 10, notwithstanding any provision of state law to the contrary, and to the fullest extent allowed under federal law, ensure that the program administering state and state-funded workforce education and employment and training program collects and reports data and results at the individual level by social security number or equivalent. Any questions about that?
Social security number. Oh, sorry. The social security number is be a requirement for the federal origination of these funds.
Correct. Right. Yeah, and that's in current law. This has just been
That's just there.
yeah, it's already there. We just moved it to a different part of the statute.
Was there a timeline or a frequency on that report that's required from the folks providing the business, the training provider, or other entity? Did I miss related to this, how often that has to happen?
So that would be up to the Commissioner of Labor to set those parameters if that person wanted to, but it's not in the statute.
What was the thought about removing coordinating intentional outreach and connections between students graduating?
So this comes up in the next, the new workforce strategy coordinator, the executive director of Office Workforce Strategy and Development.
Just to clarify, so what we just did is define the Department of Labor, the head of the Department of Labor, that person's job. And the next part is to define the executive director's job. And so there was only one person at the top. Now we're separating those two.
The complementary.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I understand what happened in the prior bills and now reflected here. The Department of Labor used to have sole responsibility for a lot of these powers and duties. And the move here, I guess in prior legislation, but then reflected here, is to have co-leaders. Can you give us a little, I'm not sure if this is Rick's question or for you folks, give us a little sense of, why, what the need was there and while we're having co-leaders, we had one before. Yeah, that's totally agnostic kind of question.
It's so, you know, I think the Department of Labor really concentrated on WIOA and making sure that they were fulfilling everything in WIOA, but it's not the total, it doesn't capture everything that workforce is in Vermont. It's a small part of all of it. We didn't know, we don't have an inventory of all the players out there.
Right.
We did find out the Department of Labor did a pilot project, I think 2019. I think of having a regional, they went around, talked to regions, they convened regions to sit down and talk. And what are the regions doing to get together? So AHS and you know, a lot of the nonprofits that are working in this realm got together in different regions of the state, and we found out there are some regions that were really good, some regions that were not doing so well in trying to perform their duties. And so this is, you know, over discussions over the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, we really felt that we needed someone at the top that's looking at workforce holistically, everything that's there, understanding who all the players are, bringing together either the regions and then bringing the state together, bringing everyone together, have these discussions on workforce and how we move forward, working in conjunction with the Department of Labor and everyone else that could be at AHS and other departments as well. And we're looking at not just, we want to make sure we're looking at everything that's out there, including state government. We're a big employer too, and we're having the same issues in state government that everyone else in the state are having. So.
Summarize in my mind, the Department of Labor had a certain focus, maybe federal law
Yeah.
kind of governed. You felt there was a little gap there, and maybe bandwidth issues, you know, priority issues. So you wanted some other entity or official to be responsible for some additional duties.
Yeah, and then, you know, we're gonna see the number of members on the State Workforce Development Board
Yeah.
increase because that's
That's it.
really unwieldy.
Okay.
And I think that we can make, along with the new executive director, can make, and the new chair of the State Workforce Development Board, make that State Workforce Development Board even more relevant, not just for WIOA, but for everything else. And I think that's, and you know, we'll certainly hear from Jay on that portion of it when we start taking testimony on it. But State Workforce Development Board, I think, contemplated by the Fed, is not just for WIOA. It's there to serve all of workforce and for us to better understand how better for the State Workforce Development Board to understand what else is going on within the workforce realm.
That's very helpful. Hope I didn't.
No, that's fine. I just think.
Sorry, now I'm
Emily?
a little more confused. So let me just make sure that I have this correct.
Okay.
So this position that we're talking about is to create the executive director of the Workforce Development Board.
That's already been created.
That's already been created.
This is-
That's a
this-
separate person.
So this is what we're doing, is delineating the duties of the
Okay.
the Commissioner of the Department of Labor and now the new Executive Director of Workforce Strategy and Development.
Okay, now the executive director of the Workforce Strategy and Development oversees the Workforce Development Board, or is that a totally separate entity? And this person is just like underneath the governor in the cabinet?
So that person is underneath the governor in the cabinet, but also supplies administrative support to the State Workforce Development Board and works with the chair of the State Workforce Development Board along with the executive committee.
Okay. Gotcha.
Just a couple of things. Number one, I see a lot about co-leadership and what is there, I just worried about like a power struggle amount who's are they gonna answer to different people? Are they gonna answer one under the other or?
Ultimately, they both answer to the governor.
Okay, and the second question I have is, in this position, and if not, is there somewhere else where there's a looking at maybe consolidating some of the organizations out there? Because it seems like there's a lot of redundancy.
And
And
that's what we need to figure out. So I think that's, for the new executive director, that's what she is going to need to do over this next year, is to take a look at everything that's out there and find out, is there redundancies? Are the programs effective that we're giving money to, that the state's giving money to, that the state's investing in? And make recommendations to us when we come back next year.
so that's in their job description.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So subsection E now sets forth the duties of the executive director. So as co-leader of workforce education and employment and training in the state, the executive director of the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development, in consultation with the Commissioner of Labor and the State Workforce Development Board, where appropriate, shall: 1, advise the governor and members of the governor's cabinet on the establishment and management of an integrated system of workforce education and training in Vermont. 2, coordinate across public and private sectors to identify and address labor force needs and ensure that workforce development program information is easily accessible to students, employees, and businesses. 3, develop a comprehensive workforce strategy that contains measurable statewide workforce goals, along with a biennial operational plan to achieve those goals that shall: A, be developed in collaboration with and representative of workforces and partners, including public, private, nonprofit, and educational sectors, and the State Workforce Development Board. B, include a set of metrics designed in consultation with the agency administration's chief performance office, used to evaluate the effectiveness of, to the extent practicable, all workforce development programs. C, align with and build upon other required strategic planning efforts, including the WEO estate plan. D, be informed by the inventory system as set forth in subdivision 4 of the subsection, which is coming next. And E, be reviewed and updated as necessary, but at least once every 2 years. Okay, 4 is the inventory system. Create, maintain, and update a publicly accessible inventory of all known workforce education and employment and training programs and activities in the state in order to: A, annually assess the investments and effectiveness of the workforce development system. B, ensure coordination and non-duplication of workforce education and employment and training activities, and identify best practices and gaps in the delivery of workforce education and employment and training programs. 5, identify and manage priority projects specific to regional workforce needs. 6, facilitate effective communication between the business community, state and local government, and public and private educational institutions for the purpose of workforce pipeline development and job placement. 7, coordinate intentional outreach and connections between students and employment opportunities in the state. And 8, ensure that the State Workforce Development Board is carrying out its duties and responsibilities as set forth in section 541A of this chapter, which is the chapter establishing the State Workforce Board and setting forth their powers. Any questions about the duties of the executive director?
So, sorry, looking at page 8, line 14, I think we talked about this as a committee, but I just wanted to come back because my memory isn't there. Ensure coordination and non-duplication of workforce education and employment training and activities. Is it federally and state funded workforce education and employment training opportunities? I just want to be really, do we need to highlight that here, or do we,
Maybe you just add the
or does that go
word,
somewhere else?
maybe you just word the word all after of.
And so
You know what I mean?
of all workforce.
For me, it's about the federal and state funded, right? Because there will be private funded workforce education, employment training activities that probably will be. We shouldn't, as a government, be controlled, right? But if we're funding them, that's where we get to say something about it. And so that's the line that I just want to make sure we're being really clear on.
Would you want to maybe make that change up on line 9 and 10
Yes,
instead of, okay,
yes, yes.
to include, so I think since we don't say federal or state, is it implied? It'd be up to the person reading it as to whether this includes federal programs, but adding the word federal would make it more clear.
Yeah, I think we need to be as explicit as we can in the law, right? We don't want to create confusion or gray areas.
But isn't there merit to documenting all of them to ensure that there isn't duplication? We don't need to control the private ones, but the public needs to see the full array, and all of that should be captured somewhere. And yeah, we need to watch out if those privately funded ones go away for some reason. Well, there's a void that we may need to step up and fill. I think there's merit in making sure that all of them are documented statewide. Again, we don't need to be their big brother and hold their hand, but the people seeking jobs need to know what's out there for the entire array.
Yeah, so it could just be the non-duplication that we are looking at. Control. Yeah, I think you're right. I think we need to figure out where the language goes.
What would a private employment and training program, what would that be?
So an example could be the McClure Foundation. Right now, they're providing free access to CCV for people to get a free education, a 2-year associate's degree. They're using their money. They're not using state dollars. They're not using federal dollars. And that's a workforce training. And so we want to know that that's happening. And but that's a finite program. It's not going to go on forever. And so is that something that should be in our strategy to look at that and to look at the data? Is it working? And is it something that then we as a state should be investing in?
So some of the childcare building futures is fully separate from federal or from, state or federal dollars, but it feels like some nonprofit organizations that are mission driven and maybe are specifically around creating a pipeline for employees to enter fields of significant need. I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm trying to make sure I sort of have my head wrapped around.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, like, if they're nonprofit organizations and they have a public mission, even if they are taking private dollars, they still are technically they are public or private dollars with public responsibility. So would that allow for any room for oversight?
No, I don't think we're really looking at oversight. I think.
Or not oversight, but just account for
So
that.
we understand.
Yeah.
I think we need to understand everything that's happening. And if we're providing public dollars in the same realm, do we need to provide those public dollars if private dollars are going in and doing the same job, unless it's not fulfilling the full need, right? So I think, and that's what we need to understand. We need to have those assessments of what's going on. Abby?
I was just gonna agree with Representative Bosch said, which is, it makes sense to me that there's value that the inventories of all programs.
Yeah.
That's all, which I think is maybe what you're saying.
One of the ways to address your concern might be to have a little sort of again, 9 to 11, keep all known programs But if the concern is, to make sure that those all include publicly funded, you could include a little including phrase at the end of line 11, so that you make sure you identify including state and federal and any other publicly funded program. Just a suggestion.
So I just want to bring us back a little bit. So we're right now just walking through the bill to get an understanding of what it says. And when we start taking testimony and we start having debate, then we'll start looking at specific areas where we think we need to change language or change it or add or delete, whatever. But I don't want us digging in too far right now.
Got it.
Because there's a lot of other people that are going to be providing testimony on this.
Sure.
And they may be able to also assist us in how this is going, how they contemplate it working. So the Department of Labor, certainly our new executive director as well. So let's keep our questions just on what's there and have a better understanding of what we're thinking, and then we'll talk about how we get there if we're not quite sure we're getting there.
Okay. So line 8, F1, the executive director of the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development shall once every 2 years issue a comprehensive biennial workforce report to the governor, the House Committees on Appropriations and on Commerce and Economic Development, and the Senate Committees on Appropriations and on Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs on or before December 1st. That includes an evaluation of the accomplishments of the state workforce investment system and the performance of participating agencies and institutions covering the previous 2 calendar years. The report shall include identification of system priorities, need for future funding requests, identification of proposed legislative and administrative changes, and any other information relevant to the performance and future needs of the workforce investment system. The report shall summarize performance and outcome information submitted by federally and state-funded workforce development and investment programs for all public and non-public programs. 2, to the extent practicable, workforce reports required of the Department of Labor, including the apprenticeship report required by 21 VSA 1113, shall be incorporated into the comprehensive report required by subdivision 1 of the subsection, meaning the previous. The executive director of the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development shall have the support and coordination of the Department of Labor in developing and submitting this report. And 4 is just standard language we use when we don't want a report to expire. If you don't have this, it's important to keep this if you want this report to be ongoing. I'll put it that way. Otherwise, reports eventually expire. And the effective date would be July 1st of 2025. And that is H34.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And one thing we didn't look at, maybe Rick, you can bring us back to last year's bill. I think there was a piece in there about a debt bank as well.
Yes.
Maybe I think that's important to understand what we did last year, because that's something else that we need to think about this year too.
Yeah. So this is going back to Act 146, passed last year. Section 3 creates this task force to study data management models. And again, this was the Sockwood Committee when they were first working. The consultant suggested this be done, some kind of data management models. So in this legislation, the executive director, in consultation with the executive committee of the State Workforce Development Board and the Agency of Digital Services, shall issue a written report to this committee and the Senate Committee on Economic Development regarding the development of a data trust as outlined in Model 3 of the final report of the State Oversight Sockwood. The report shall include a recommendation on audience, partners, use cases, outcomes, and data required for future workforce education and training programs. A detailed review of the current availability of public and private workforce development and training data, education data, and demographic data, including the integration of data between the state's workforce development and training programs and private programs funded through state funding dollars. 3, a summary of the progress made in the development of data sharing relationships with the stewards of identified data sets. 4, draft legislative language for the creation of a data tool. 5, the amount of funding necessary to establish and maintain the use of a data tool. And 6, a summary of other efforts across state government and through the Agency of Digital Services regarding the development of data trusts, along with best practices identified through those efforts. So this is due to you all by the end of, December 15, 2025.
We heard testimony from North Dakota where they have created a data bank or data trust. I think it took them 10 years to get to that point to get it up and running. I don't know how well it's functioning now. It seemed like it was pretty promising. You know, when we were having our discussions along with the consultant, our thought is that, you know, we get a lot of requests that come in. That's outside the agency. So there's others that, a lot of nonprofits that come in and do a lot of work in workforce, among other nonprofits that come in and ask for dollars. And our thought is that, you know, sometimes we don't have enough data to really understand whether or not they're, you know, what they're doing is working. If it is working, are there other places in state government that this is also being done? It goes back to the duplication of services. But it's also, you know, if something is working well and the data is there, they should be going to the agencies and departments for funding. They shouldn't be coming directly to us. And then we have to choose the winners and losers. And ultimately, if it worked that way, we wouldn't have to spend so much time working with appropriations on the budget, looking at our charges. There are where our jurisdictions are to look at those different areas that are being funded and whether or not they're effective or not. Everything would be done through data. So our hope is eventually down the road, and maybe you all are here, and I'm not. You can, and whoever follows us will be able to really look at the data and understand that these are working, and we really need to continue to invest in, maybe invest more. Over here, they may not be working, and we shouldn't be investing in that anymore. So it makes the decision-making easier for the legislature, and I think the decision-making for the agencies and departments as well. And I think, you know, if this works, it doesn't have to be just for workforce. It can be for all other places in state government where everything is happening. But one thing is certain, we do need to be data-driven. Any other questions for Rick? Rick, thank you very much. Well, guess I'll see you downstairs. Right. What do we have now? Okay.
No one will be.
I really know how to clear around these things.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Is it all right if I stay in my seat?
Yes, please.
What's everyone doing this morning? Good. Thank you all so much for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for coming in.
I'm going to do just a quick introduction of VBSR. I didn't mean to assume. You're the chair.
That's
You
fine.
facilitate. I don't need to just take right over as soon as I sit down.
Introduce yourself and few members we haven't had a break this morning, so they may need to.
Do folks just want to take it? I mean, I don't want to make assumptions.
I think we'll be done like in half an hour anyway, so everybody can take an early lunch. We are going to lunch across the street if everyone remembers.
I had already forgotten.
Let's do that.
Well, I'll read just a brief prepared introduction about who Vermont Business for Social Responsibility is, and then I'll talk about our advocacy agenda for this session, and then happy to answer any questions. And again, I'm always happy to meet with folks one-on-one. I'm in the cafeteria most days. And I am personally based in Royalton, so if we ever need to set up an in-person meeting, don't hesitate to ask. I'm always happy to come to you because I'm right in the middle. And it's nice to see you again. Hi. So my name is Johanna de Graffenried, and I represent the nearly 600 members of Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility. Our members include small and large businesses ranging across all economic sectors in Vermont. We're a statewide nonprofit business association with a mission to leverage the power of businesses for positive social and environmental impact. For over 30 years, Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility has been a catalyst for cultural and structural change, drawing upon the collective power and wisdom of our network to share knowledge, create solutions, dismantle systems of oppression, and advocate for public policy. We advance VBSR's mission through transformational educational experiences, public policy, and values-driven business leadership towards our vision, a just, thriving, and transformative economy that works for all people and the planet. VBSR's nearly 600 members, including dozens of B Corps around the state, are located in all 14 of Vermont counties and represent more than 45 different industries ranging from hospitality to manufacturing, agriculture to telecommunications, aerospace to lifestyle and financial services, all the way to academic institutions. For over 3 decades, VBSR has been a driving force utilizing the strength of businesses and community to affect change in the Vermont State House. So that's just a little bit about us and what we do and who we are. Nice broad categories across all economic sectors, over 30 years of experience working across the state of Vermont and representing a wide range of businesses from small to large businesses all across the state. And I'm really proud to represent us as Vermont's public policy manager. So I want to quickly go over what our agenda is in terms of just top line items that especially will come into y'all's committee for this session. First, we have always focused on climate change. We will continue to focus on climate change this legislative session. I want to reiterate that these priorities come from our members. So they come from member surveys, they come from communications and events with our members, they come from direct feedback from our members. So I don't set our public policy, our members do. In addition to working on climate change, I want to speak specifically about the Global Warming Solutions Act, as well as other climate bills. We'll be strongly supporting the Global Warming Solutions Act, as well as continuing to advance efforts on reducing climate changing emissions. We will also be working this year on the care economy. We, for many, many years, have been supporting Let's Grow Kids as a partner and ally to expand early childhood education in the state. We will continue to work with them this year to, first of all, advance the OPR recommendations about early childhood educator standards and the certification program. We'll also be making sure to work with them to ensure that the money that was raised to support early childhood education in the state remains in that bucket of funds. We're also going to be working to support paid family and medical leave as it becomes available and opportunities throughout the legislative session. And we've been a part of that coalition for many years, so that's not a new proposal for us. We'll also be working on employee basic needs, and that ranges on anything from healthcare to housing. So this year especially, we will be supporting housing initiatives that support middle and low income Vermonters, and especially those who are working in our state as employees, business owners, and community members. So we'll be looking especially at the middle income mortgage support programs and the revolving rental loan fund and others that the state is already administering, making sure that those funds continue to move forward as they're essential for Vermonters, and looking at other opportunities to ensure that our housing is expanded and that it's in a thoughtful, smart economic development model where we're continuing to think through the impacts of climate change as well, and working to support working Vermonters across the state. So that's the long and short of it. I'm here for questions. We'll get more details about specific bills as they keep getting introduced, of course, but for now, we'll keep it at some big buckets.
I didn't hear you mention anything about data privacy, and I'm curious.
So our members didn't express to us that that was a top concern of theirs for this legislative session. We really heard resoundingly from our members that their top priorities are housing, healthcare, and early childhood education, and that we continue to work on climate. We will weigh in on some of the bills if asked to do so, but that's not one of our lead issues. But that's not one of our lead issues for the session.
How do businesses become members? Can you speak a little bit about some of, I think I've heard of Ben and Jerry's. I'm familiar
Sure,
with that.
yeah.
But can you talk about some of your smallest members, your distribution throughout the state, just where you reach and how?
Yeah, so because we've been around for over 30 years, we're really fortunate that we really are in all 14 counties. We have members in the southern part of the state where you're from. We have worked with large businesses, anyone from Orvis, for example, who's a member, and others who are much smaller members, including architectural and design firms that work all across Vermont. Some of our businesses are based in certain areas and they really have services and providers that are based there, but others are really statewide entities as businesses. And so I'd be always happy to provide a specific list, especially if there's a specific industry that you're curious about. Yeah, and also any list that you all are interested in of members in your specific districts. I never like to come in and just throw lists and names at folks without request. But I'm always happy to provide that kind of information.
For full disclosure, I have been my business has been a member for 21 years, and until last month, I was on the board of directors. So if anyone has questions about BVSR, I can probably answer to offline.
Thank you so much.
Just want to recognize your organization. There was an issue, quite a while ago around, what corporate powers were and any limitations on corporate powers. Did not expressly allow for a corporation to take into consideration social kinds of issues. And your organization, I think, was the leader in around making sure that that is something that corporations could do, not required to do, but could do, was permissive, that has since been, I think, replicated in a lot of other states. And that's to your credit.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
So I would say, when it comes to data privacy, we'll certainly be taking that up again. And we would certainly ask for you to weigh in on it. I know it's not a priority, but it could have a lot of meaning to your business community, depending on what we decide on doing. And so, we're asking all the business community, all of the representatives, different organizations to talk to their membership on data privacy and be part of the conversation so that we can get something through this year where we're not getting pushback from either businesses or individuals because they object to something that they didn't tell us about.
Are there any specific kind of industries that you all are especially hoping to hear from, or types of businesses, so that I can be thoughtful about that?
Well, it could affect all types.
Of course.
So we want to know if there's something that we have in the bill that's going to affect from the smallest business to the largest business, and try to work to alleviate some of those issues if we can.
Yeah, I would just encourage the committee, and you've mentioned this already, Chair, is that We think through how it impacts our smallest businesses across the state and really making sure that especially our socially responsible businesses who would likely be in favor of very thoughtful data protection, that we think through the economic and technical burden as we're implementing, because I think that always will lead to better success.
But we certainly, if it's something that's favorable to your businesses, would like to know that as well. Would be very helpful for us moving forward too, if our business community is in favor of the things that we want to do in that bill.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, if there's no other questions for Joanna, thank you for coming in.
Anytime.
Appreciate it. And let us know as the wall starts to fill up. If you want to weigh in on any of the subjects, touch base with myself and Anna Grace or with the vice chair, ranking member. And we'll certainly schedule you to come in to testify, or if you have a business that would like to testify as well, be happy to have them in.
Wonderful. That's so helpful. I really appreciate you all having me today. I recognize that even just coming in briefly to introduce myself with so many new faces in the building can be really helpful, including my new face in the building as someone who's newly representing VBSRs at this summer. So I'll certainly reach out, but please don't ever hesitate to contact me if you have questions about pieces of legislation that you all are working on, or if you want to specifically request that I come in on any specific issue that might not be on our key agenda that I'm actively tracking.
Be good for us to introduce ourselves to you as
Oh,
well.
I would love that. I mean, I didn't research, but I would love for you all to share.
I'm Jonathan Brooks, the John Connell, representing Connell, Stanford, Greensboro, Searsburg, and Woodford. It's nice to see you.
Ralston, representing Bristol, Lincoln, Moncton, and Scarlett.
And you know me, Abby Duke from Burlington.
Edie Granning, representing Jericho and Underhill, and the vice chair of the committee.
It's just a regular district in Burlington.
I know, well, I should have said agricultural, that was something I haven't used yet.
I'm Mike Markoff, Coventry, represent Coventry, Irisburg, Newport Town, Troy J, Westfield, Eden, and Lowell. And I'm chair of the committee.
I'm Kirk White, you know me. Bethel, Rochester, Stockbridge, and Hancock, and I'm the ranking member. It's good to see you.
Great to see you again.
Michael Booton, Berry City.
Tony Mikolas from Milton, representing most of Milton and a little bit of Georgia.
Dave Bosch, Wallingford, Clarendon, West Rutland, and the bulk of Rutland Town.
There we go. Wow. You've got a lot of economic development. Hi, Monique. Yes, lovely to see you.
Committee assistant.
Anna Grace, thank you for all of your work coordinating. I really appreciate it. Yes, nice to meet you in person. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you very much for coming in. And,
Sounds good. And welcome to everyone. I know we've been here for a couple weeks, but we're really just getting started. So thank you all so much for your hard work. We really appreciate it. And I look forward to speaking with you all more this session.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, all.
Okay, committee, I think we're done for the morning. So any questions before we sign on?